So we're going to learn Daf Samach and the Gemara on the bottom of Nun Tesam and Beis Sholchule B'nei Galila LeRabbi Chelbo. Now the Gemara is going through the Seder of Alios, and we start with a Kohen, and then we go to a Levi, and Achreim, after the Levi, Mi Korin, who's going to be called up for Shlishi, etc., etc. Is there a Seder, a certain type of order? And what is that order? Lohavi biyadeh, Rabbi Chelbo had no answer. Asav shayle Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. Amalei, Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha gave the following answer: Achreim korim talmidei chachamim hamemunim leparnasim ala tzibur. So in the community there were chachamim that were designated for parnasei tzibur. They would be in charge of organizing the religious life of the tzibur, and even in terms of finances like divvying out tzedakah, they were in charge. And as a matter of respect for them, we call them up the first Yisrael on the list. Achreim afterwards, we're up to Revi now. Talmidei chacham ra'uyim l'manoso parnos tzibur. They have enough of a background, and if you want to call it a resume, that they have reached the level of scholarship, which according to the Gemara in Shabbos Kuf Yudal means that you can ask them a Dvar Halacha anywhere, and they won't hesitate, they'll have an answer. And right now, there's no need for them. They're in the bullpen, second string, to be appointed as Parnosim al Tzibur. V'achreim, now we're up to Chamishi. B'nei Talmidei Chacham Shavosei Memunim Parnosim al Tzibur. These are the children of those who were called up for Shlishi, and we have a kavod for their father, and therefore we call them up. V'achreim, by the way, it doesn't seem like they made such a big deal about Shishi the way we do today.
Interesting.
Then we go down the line to Shvi, B'nei Talmidi, and then we have Achreim Rashi Knesios. So these were the presidents of the synagogues, and they also got involved in all of the communal activities, including giving out tzedakah. And then finally, we're at the end of the list for Cholada. Anybody could be called up afterwards. Now, in the note here, he mentions that according to the Prisha, Rashi Knesios get precedence over anybody else. Meaning, if you've exhausted all the list above, then comes Rashi Knesios. That's how we understood it. And therefore, Achreim Kol Adam means that only after you've given that honor to the Rashi Knesios, then we give it to anyone, any rank and file member of the community. However, the Or Sameach, Rabbi Simcha, was medayik from the Lashon HaGemara. It doesn't say in the Gemara explicitly Achreim Kol Adam. The word Achreim was omitted. It says Achreim Rashi Knesios V'Chol Adam. And he understood it to mean that and any other person is equal to the Rashi Knesios. So there's no adifus, and we don't give any priority to the Rashi Knesios over Kol Adam. Sholchulei b'nei Agol, another question that was asked to Rabbi Chelbo by the Toshavei Agolil. Ma'al likros b'chumoshin. Are you allowed to read the parsha in the public reading of the Sefer Torah if the Sefer Torah consists of one full chumash? So on the one hand, it's not a full Sefer Torah, but on the other hand, it is a full chumash. And in order for a Sefer Torah to be kosher, it has to have what's called an ibud aklaf, l'shem kedushas Sefer Torah. In fact, we had a whole sugya earlier in the parak about whether a person who was in charge of ibud aklaf is believed to testify that he did not do it properly, lishma. So we have a sefer that's written on klaf, but it's only one chumash of the 5. The Beis HaKnesses b'tzibur, can we read it publicly? is this a zilzul in the kavod tzibur? It looks like we're really stingy, that all we can afford is to write one chumash on a cloth. And that's not appropriate for the tzibur. And that's called anius shalat tzibur. Lahavi biyode also Reb Yitzchak Nafka. He didn't have an answer, so once again he goes to Reb Yitzchak Nafka. Lahavi biyode. In this case, even Reb Yitzchak Nafka had no answer. Also, v'shol be midrasha. Maybe someone in the base medrash, one of the talmidim, would be able to quote a source and be medayik and prove, and we're not aware of that source. And that's indeed what happened. Pashtu miha. They found a statement in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that would answer this question. The Amar of Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, say for Torah shechase Yiriya achas ein korimbo. Now this is a bit strange because the Gemara was asking a suffix about an entire chumash, which is an entity unto itself. Rabbi Yochanan's statement was that it's missing a Yiriya. In other words, one section of that part of the Sefer Torah was actually missing, and therefore the Sefer Torah is not appropriate for Kriya B'Tzibur. The Gemara therefore rejects it. Hasam, in the case of Rabbi Yochanan, you don't read from it to Mechsar D'Milse. There's an obvious chisaron in the fact that this Sefer Torah is not shalem, and it's missing an entire Yiriya, one whole column. But Hacha, in the question that we asked you, Lo Mechsar B'Milse. As far as that chumash is concerned, let's call it Breishis, we have all the Gilyonos. We're not missing any part of that chumash. It's just that we only have one chumash as opposed to having all 5 chumashim. But we're not missing any Yiriya. Rabbi Rav Yossi Damri Travayu ein karim b'chumashim b'tei knesios mishum kavod tzibur. Like we said before, it looks like you're being very stingy and you're only paying a sofer to write one chumash. What, are you so poor that you don't have mammon, you don't have enough money to buy a Sefer Torah? And this seems to be the final maskana of the Gemara. We do not read publicly from a Sefer Torah that has only one chumash. Rabbi Rav Yosef the Amrit Shavayu, Hai Sefer Aftarta, also lemikre b'Shabbos. If you write a haftorah on a sefer, in other words, you have divrei neviim, and instead of writing all of, let's say, Yechezkel, you only wrote one chapter of Yechezkel for the purpose of a navi. That's exactly what we have today. But apparently, back at the time of the Talmud, that was a big issue. And Rabbi Rav Yosef said, "No, wait, what's going on over here? This is not a full book of navi. This is only one section of navi, and I'll let her read from it. My timer." So Nitali Kosev. The Torah tells us that you're only allowed to write a sefer if it's a sefer shalom. You can't write an incomplete sefer. And therefore, if you can't write such a sefer, you're not allowed to read from such a sefer. And basically, if you read from such a sefer, according to Rabbi Rav Yosef, you're like reading Baal Peh. And we're not allowed to read Torah Shebechsav Baal Peh. Marbrav Ashi, Omar, he adds, not only is it also to read the Haftorah from this Sefer Haftarta that has only one section from an entire Navi written, but not only that, Litultuli also. Namios, it becomes muktzah. You're not allowed to even move it. If you're not allowed to read from it, then it has no function, and therefore it's muktzah, and it's also betiltel.
So that's very strange, right?
I mean, the Gemara is going to reject it, but
oh, okay, fine, all right. Yeah. What if I want to learn from, right? How could it be muktzah?
Right. So v'loi, sharla tiltule v'sharla mikrebe. We're allowed to be metaltal it. There's no isur muktzah, and the Gemara has no compunctions about telling you that you're allowed to read from it. In fact, there were many such sfarim that were written that were incomplete sfarim. They were used to learn on Shabbos. Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Shimon Lakish, ma'ayni b'sifra d'Agadata b'Shabsa. They used to write on a cloth a section of Agadata, only one section, and they would learn from it on Shabbos. So the Gemara says, wait a minute, we have a principle, Dvarim shenemru b'al peh, iata rashoyla omer b'ksav. Agadata is Dvarim shenemru b'al peh. It's Torah b'al peh. It's not part of Tanakh. And the Gemara is going to derive later on Daf Mem Beis from a pasuk. Ki al pi advar ma'ele, that Dvarim shenemru b'al peh, that means Torah b'al peh, like halachos and agoros, also l'kosmi, not let her write them down. So how is it possible that they violated this Isur? They wrote down halachos and agoros, which is Torah b'al peh, and then they learned from it on Shabbos? Ella, but the answer is Kevan Delo Efsha. Now, this phrase Kevan Delo Efsha is going to appear over and over and over again. And what it means is, based on a pasuk in Tehillim Kuf Yud Tes, Eis lasos lashem eferus orsecha. Lo Efsha means that we no longer can remember and retain in our memory Torah Sheba'al Peh. Therefore, we have no choice but to commit the Torah Sheba'al Peh to writing. That's why Rebbe authored, or shall we say, edited the Mishnayos. And that's called Eis lasos lashem eferus orsecha. Nami here too, if we apply this to the Sefer Torah, came to Lo Efshar. We can't expect every tzibur to write the entire Sefer Navi on a cloth. And therefore, when it comes to reading the cloth, we have no choice but to write only that Haftorah that we're going to read. Just get myself a drink. So let's just review. We have this principle of Kevan Delo Efshar in two cases. Number one, in Sifrei Agadata, which is Torah Sheba'al Peh, and we want to learn it on Shabbos from a Ksav. And in the case of writing the Haftorah for that week's Parsha on a cloth. So what we said before, Ira, about Rav and Rav Yosef, that they were totally opposed to writing a Haftorah, or for that matter, for writing a Chumash. So in the case of a Chumash, then we had the principle of Kvod HaTzibur, and therefore we're not allowed to write and read a Chumash in the Tzibur. But as far as writing the Haftorah is concerned, the Gemara completely outrightly rejects it. Certainly it's not also betiltul, it's not even also beksiva, and we're going to read from it based on the principle of Lo Efsha. Boy minei abai mirab. Ma'u lichto megillah letinok lislamid ba. If we want to write one parsha in the Torah, because we want to teach a young child that parsha in the Torah, and we have a principle that either we write the entire Torah or not less than the Torah, but yet the Torah itself was given in segments, according to one man diyom. Gemara says, Tiboy, I'm going to ask this question according to both opinions. There's a controversy about how the Torah was written by Moshe Rabbeinu. Leman diyom, according to one opinion, Torah Megillah Nitna. Each section, each parsha of the Torah was said to Moshe as a separate entity. And at the end of the 40-year period, at the end of his career, before his passing, when he had all the parshios, he integrated them all with sewing them with Gittin in order to make one Sefer Torah. But then at least at one point in time, the Torah was given as a Megillah with one parsha. Nevertheless, the Gemara says, I'm going to still doubt whether you're allowed to do that for a Tino. T-boy, and how much more so should we ask the question, that Moshe Rabbeinu was not allowed to write parshios individually as he received them, piecemeal, but rather only when he finished hearing the entire Torah, then he wrote all of the Torah in one full sweep, in one simultaneously. And now the Gemara is going to analyze the question. Yeah, all right. Initially, Moshe Rabbeinu committed each parsha unto itself to writing. And therefore, Keva de Megillah Nitna Kos. And maybe you would think that since Moshe was allowed to write each Megillah, each parsha unto itself, then we too could do that for the sake of teaching a Chalo Dilma. Maybe no. Keva de Idbak Idbik. Since at the end of this whole process, Moshe Rabbeinu took all the different parshios that were written on different cloth and he sewed them all together. Idbak means they became one entity and you're not allowed to write one parsha unto itself. Simple pshat would be, without even thinking about it, that since the Torah was only written as an entire entity, but not as separate sections, Moshe did not have license to write the Torah as it was given. Let's say, for example, in Parshas Ba'aloscha, we have the question of Pesach Sheni, right? The Anoshim Tmeim, they came to Moshe Rabbeinu. So Moshe Rabbeinu got the Parsha Pesach Sheni, but he wasn't allowed to write it down, to commit it to writing. Only at the end of his 40-year career, then did he write the entire Torah. So therefore, you're not allowed to write a parsha in the Torah. Dilma perhaps came into Lo Efshar. Once again, we should activate the principle of Eis Lasos Lashem Eferes Secha. You can't expect that for every single child that we want to teach, we're going to write the entire Torah. Amalei and Rabba responds to Abaye and Kosvin. We're not allowed to write separate sections of the Torah. And why not? We're not allowed to write parshios individually in the Torah as a separate klaf, Megillah. Why? Because at the end of the day, Moshe Rabbeinu had to attach all the Megillos together and sew them with Gittin in order to create one indivisible Sefer Torah. So we can't go back to what Moshe Rabbeinu did initially as he was given that section of the Torah, and he wrote it as a Megillah. And Rabbah is not willing to apply the principle in this case of Eis Lasos Lashem Eferes Secha. In fact, Rabbah is quite consistent when you think about it, because when we go back a few lines to the earlier part of this Gemara when we talk about writing an Haftorah, Rabbah was the one who insisted, together with Rav Yosef, that they write the entire book of Nevi'im in order to allow reading the Haftorah from one section. He does not operate with Eis Lasos Lashem. Esvei, the Gemara is going to reject Rabbah. Abai is going to reject Rabbah based on a Mishnah in Masechet Yomi and Daf Lamed Zayin. And we're talking about a whole list of things that were implemented by Hileni Amalka, Afi Asasa in the Beis Medrash. Now, you know that the Kohen has to write, in the case of a Sota, a Parsha of Sota, and he doesn't remember all the words in the Parsha. It's got to be written meticulously. So what did she do? She created on a tavla some sort of a tablet of Zav that was made of gold, and on that tablet of gold, she had it inscribed the Parsha of Sota. So the Kohen, when he writes the Parsha of Sota, he simply copies over word for word for the Luach Shel Zav. But we see clearly that you're allowed to write a Parsha in the Torah. And this is a contradiction to Rabbah, who insists that Ein Kosvin, there's no heter whatsoever, even to Lo Efshar, to write sections in the Torah, in that case, in order to teach a Tinok. That Tavla that was produced by Hileni Amalka, which had on it the Parsha of Sota, was Bi Aleph Beis. This is what we call no trikun. which means that you write the first letter of each word. That's called aleph beis. So if you have a word that starts with an aleph, you write an aleph. A word that starts with a beis, write a beis. And therefore, there was no violation of writing one parsha in the Torah, because it wasn't really written at all. It was only written in aleph beis. Esvei, the Gemara raises the following kasha. And this brisa that the Gemara is about to quote is addressing the tavla, that tablet that was created with one parsha on it, kishu kosev. What does this Kohen do when he writes the parsha of Sota? Roeh, he looks at the tavla, v'kosev, and he writes his Megillah, k'moch kosev b'tavla, copying it from a tavla. So we see that a tavla had on it the entire parsha, not the way Reb Shimon Lakish said it in the name of Reb Yanai, that it was only an aleph beis. It was not only aleph beis. It doesn't say roa v'kosev. Roa v'kosev means masha kosev b'tavla. He actually copied that was in the tablet. So it must be the tablet had all the words, full-fledged words, and then he would copy them. It wasn't just aleph beis. And once again, we see that you're allowed to write a parsha achas min Torah. So the Gemara now continues and explains the brisa by saying, Ema, perhaps, kema shekosu b'tavla. Don't read the brisa as kosev masha kosu b'tavla, but rather kema shekosu b'tavla. It wasn't really written full words, complete words on the tavla. It was only written, as Rish Lakish says, osios, aleph beis, and it was Kimosha Kosev b'tavla. In other words, he was following the lead of the aleph beis when the Kohen wrote the parsha of Sota. He was following that which is written on the tavla, the aleph beis. So Gemara asks the following kasha, Esvei, what are we going to do with the brisa? The brisa says Kshu Kosev. When the Kohen writes the parsha of Sota, Roa b'tavla v'kosev masha kosev b'tavla. And the brisa now clarifies what that means. Mahu kosev b'tavla. What is it that he copied from the tavla? Im shochav v'im lo shochav. In the parsha of Sota, the pasuk says, "V'yitein ish bach eshchavto mibaladei isheth." And in any event, it says, "Im lo shachav, im shachav," and these were the words that were written on the tavla. That's what the brisa says. Don't tell me it was written on an aleph beis form of no trikun. And the Gemara answers, no. In this brisa that explains how they wrote the parsha of Sot on a tavla, b'seirugin, they wrote the first word in each one of the psukim, and that word they wrote b'shleimus. It wasn't aleph beis. And when it says in the brisa, shachav and lo shachav, these are the examples given by the brisa, it means that they wrote the first few words of the pasuk. The rest of the pasuk they left out. Or, alternatively, they wrote it the way Reish Lakish said, aleph beis. And here you're allowed to write a ksiva because it's not a ksiva the entire parsha. And the Gemara now states that this is totally the machlokes tanoim. Are you allowed to write a parsha in the Torah? Now, we're going to quote from the 5th parak of Masechet Sofrim, which is an anthology of brisos. In kosu megillah tinok l'slamidba. One is forbidden from writing a klaf that has just one section of the Torah in order to use it to teach the young child. But v'im daito lahashlim muta. if he's begun to write the Chumash, and his intention is to write the entire Chumash from Bereshis Bar Elokim to Li'enei Kol Yisrael, then he's allowed to, meaning he can take a break in the middle of this long journey of writing the entire Torah, and he's allowed to take a parsha in the Torah and teach it to the child. That's the sheet of the Tanakh. Rav Yehuda Omer, there are parshas that you're allowed to write, even in an event that you don't have intention of writing the entire Sefer Torah. And which of these? The Bereshis, from the beginning of Bereshis Bar Elokim, ad dar hamav. Ad means up to, but not including the story of the dar hamav. Means the entire section of Maaseh Bereshis. So that basically Rabbi Yehuda is telling us that you are allowed to write sections of the Torah, but they have to have a thematic, underlying, unified theme. Like, for example, the story of creation. Another example would be V'Toras Kohanim Sefer Yikra Ad Vayehi B'Yom HaShmini. All the commands about the Karbanos come to a closure when we get to Parsha Shmini. Then we go on to other mitzvahs. So it basically comes out that according to Rabbi Yehuda, you're allowed to write sections in the Torah that have a thematic relationship between them. Rabbi Yochanan Mishum, Rabbi B'na. Now we get back to the Machlokas, Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish, about how Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the Torah. And according to Rabbi Yochanan, Megillah Nitna Shenemar, he derives it from a pasuk until in Perek Men. With regard to Sefer Torah, Oz Amarti, Hine Basi b'Megillah Sefer Kosev Alai. And the language of Megillah means that they didn't write the entire Torah in one shot, but rather at the beginning they wrote just the Megillah of Bereshis. Then they wrote just the Megillah of Noach, and then the Megillah of Avram. And this is what David HaMelech has in mind in Tehillim when he writes Torah Hine Basi b'Megillas Sefer. And that's Rabbi Yochanan. Reish Lakish Omer Torah Chasuma Nitna. The Torah was written in one fell swoop at the end of Moshe's career. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Lakoach Eis Sefer HaTorah Hazeh. Now, what did Reish Lakish see in this pasuk? I think he understands that the phrase Sefer HaTorah refers to the entire Torah. I'm just not sure what the word Lakoach means here in this context. Should really open up a Chumash and see. Dvarim Lamed Aleph. Let's check in. Avasamtem oso He doesn't quote the entire pasuk here. Misad Aaron bris Hashem Elokeichem. Yeah, but how do you know it wasn't written originally Megillah? Oh, that's exactly the Gemara's kasha. Maybe we'll get clarity for Reish Lakish a little bit later on. Idoch Nami. What does Rabbi Yochanan do with this pasuk Sefer Torah, which implies the entire Sefer? And he answers, "Hahula Basa de Idbik." You're right; they were written Megillah, and then at the end he connected them, tied them together, and that's what it means. Sefer HaTorah Zeh Vidach Nami Haksiv Megillah Sefer Kosev Alai. Now he doesn't bother defending Reish Lakish's interpretation of the pasuk in Dvarim Lamed Aleph, but he goes back to the pasuk in Tehillim, which seems to indicate that Basiv Megillah Sefer. Hahu, that pasuk doesn't prove that the Torah was written Megillah as separate entities, but the Chol Torah Kula Ikri Megillah. The entire Torah is called Megillah, so the word Megillah here in this context refers to the entire Torah. How do you prove that the word Megillah refers to the entire Torah? The Chsiv, the pasuk in Zechariah, Vayomer Elai Ma Torah, Vaomer Ani Roeh Megillah Afa. You saw like a flying Sefer Torah. Or maybe the phrase Megillah Afa is referring to the Sefer Torah. But from the pasuk Megillah, the Megillah Sefer Kosvel, you can't prove anything about the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu wrote it in segments, because the word Megillah can refer to the entire Sefer Torah. Inami, another way in which we can interpret this pasuk in Tehillim, based on the Shita Reish Lakish, who holds that Torah Chasuma Nitna, but it's called Megillah. Why? Lichir Rabbi Levi, Tiamar Rabbi Levi, Shmona Parshios Nemr. We're talking about the day of the dedication of the Mishkan. And Rabbi Levi says that on that day, Bayom Shehukam Ba Mishkan, 8 parshias were given and written, and they were for the benefit of certain groups, and they got the Sefer for that group, whatever parshia of the 8 parshias was relevant to them. And that was called L'Tzarechos Hayom. Now, these parshias are not contiguous, and therefore they had to write each parsha on its own Megillah. And for the fact that 8 parshias that we single out here were already written Megillah b'fnei atzma, each parsha, even though the Torah was not given as a whole yet, then we should assume that the other parshas in the Torah were also written each parsha as a Megillah unto itself. And now I want to read to you his note here. He says, there was no need to write the entire Torah up front. Kim lahashlim ad harishona, umerishona ad shalachrea v'chein kula v'chibrum achar kach yachad l'sefer echad, and that's why it's called a Megillah, because it was written as a Tzura Megillah with separate sections. But those 8 parshios were needed at that point in time, and they were written before Nesinas HaTorah. The Torah hadn't been given yet. Other parshios were written together after Moshe Rabbeinu received them and had received the entire Torah. And that's called Chasum. Now we're in the middle here of Rabbi Levi. Shmona Parshas Nemru B'Yom Shukam Bo Mishkan. The Eluheim, what are these 8 parshas? Number 1, Parshas Kohanim. This is Parshas Emor. That prescribes a Kohen from contracting tumah, or from marrying certain women, or from doing the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash when they're balei mum. Parshas Leviim. This is the parsha. I believe it's in Baloscha. I'm not sure. And this is the parsha of Taras. Yeah. In the parsha of Taras HaLeviim for the purpose of avodas Beis Hamikdash.
Yeah.
And there was Giluach, and there was Tnufa, the whole 9 yards. Uparshas Tmeim. Right, this is a parsha in Baloscha of the Tmeim who were not able to bring the Korban Pesach on Rishon. And the parsha had to teach us that on that very day they were commanded to send the Tmeim chutz l'machta. And how are they to bring the Korban Pesach? So they were given the option of Pesach Shein. So how many do we have so far? Kohanim, Leviim, and Tmeim. 4. Uparsha Shiluach Tmeim. On that very day, they were commanded to set up 3 machnos. Machne Yisrael, Machne Leviim, Machne Shechina. And the Tmeim had to be sent chutz l'machne. Again, each Tomei, each category was sent out of whichever machna he had to be sent out. In case of Mitzvah, for example, he gets sent out chutz l'sholosh machnas. Whereas the Zav only gets thrown out of machna Shechina, machna Leviim. Tomei Mes is only sent out of machna Shechina. Next, so we have 3 parshas. No, 1, 2, 3, 4 parshas. Now we're to number 5. Uparshas Achrei Mos, and this is the laws of Avodas Yom Kippurim, and that parsha was given on that same day, because on that day Nadav Avihu died when they went into the Kodesh Kadoshim, and Aaron HaKohen was warned that he shouldn't go in to that place, with the exception of Yom Kippurim. So that's the Isur Kodesh of Kodesh Kadosh. And now we turn to Daf Samach Amud Beis, Uparsha Shsuya Yayin. This was the parsha in which the Torah prescribes Kohanim who had some intoxicating drink not to enter into the Mishkan. Uparshas Neros, the Hadlaka of Neros Shebet Migdash. And Parshas Paradum, which we need to be mitayar the people for Akrovas HaPesach. And that took place on the very morning after Hakomas HaMishkan, as it says in Bamidbar Yutes, V'yizah el nochach pnei moed. In other words, he's only allowed to do this after Hukam ol moed, it means the Mishkan. Okay, then I think this is where we'll stop for today.
Okay.
Okay, have a great week.
Yeah, you too, Skaya.
So much.